prepared to ask their questions. I'll leave my own until later. So let me hear from the tradition with the vice, then the Senate leader.
Colleagues, not knowing where the pendulum is going to swing, allow me to recognize the chairman as somebody who is very hardworking, very dedicated to his job, and his integrity, which I believe are the three cores that made Mr. President to represent him to the National Assembly for screening to be appointed to do his second life, which I believe, like the chairman has said, is the last chance you'll have to be at the INEC as head of that institution. Mr. Nominee, I would want to congratulate you for that. That is being nominated by Mr. President to be here. I will have only one question for you, Mr. Chairman, because I believe my other distinguished colleagues have so many to ask. And that question has to do, we are from somewhere, and where we are now. Should you get the approval to go for the second tenure, what do you hope to do differently to perfect elections in Nigeria? Because we know there are so many other lingering problems that need to be done. What do you intend to do before you finally bow out from the election institution? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
As INEC chairman, sorry?
I think we should go direct for questions.
I have two questions for you, Mr. Nominee. I note that when you were telling us about yourselves, I mean, we already know about you anyway. You said with pride how you became a professor at 36. Am I correct? You, towards the end of your presentation, you also said, oh, you better stop talking because as a professor, you go on and on and on and on. That would seem to suggest very strongly that teaching is your first love. There's no question about that. I can see the passion in you. So I was just wondering, was there any time you thought, why should I go a second time? Let me go back to my first love. Number one question. Then number two, I mean, I have known you for quite a while, even before, during your days in TED Fund. And I know your passion for the Project Nigeria. But I don't think the same can be said of your 36 recs. So could you tell us a story of any of the recs you found wanting and how you corrected it? Thank you.
Resume. One can say that it is very, very rich in academic and administrative exposure and experiences. Your intellectual resourcefulness and productivity is not in doubt. You are intellectually equipped and experientially capacitated to effectively undertake for the nation this very important assignment that you are being called upon to undertake. Mr. Nominee, the argument has always been, do we need strong institutions or strong leaders? And building strong institutions requires the enabling legal framework and, of course, the people that will run those institutions. You are being picked, having served for 5 years, to again do for the nation and head an institution that is so critical to the survival of our democracy. And the independence of the INEC is what Nigerians would want to see, that it should be guaranteed not only in name but in practice, what else would you be doing, and what is it that will actually guarantee the independence of INEC under your leadership if and when you successfully pass through this screening? Secondly, just a second one, distinguished chair. There is this issue that has been part of our problems in election that has to do with Section 138D of the Electoral Act, that has to do with exclusion, disqualification on the unlawful exclusion. Let me just say unlawful exclusion. And what some of us have seen over the years is that, of course, unlawful exclusion will be a matter of fact before the court of law. But where a party's candidate, or where a party has nominated its candidate and there is no problem, only for INEC to exclude that party on the ballot and subsequently risking the victory of the candidate and the party that emerges victorious in the election. And some persons, of course some Nigerians, have alluded to the thinking that there is some foul play where INEC, through its officials, may deliberately, at the critical moment, exclude the logo of a party that is qualified, its candidate fully nominated and qualified, and then at a critical moment nullify the entire elections. I want to find out from you, Mr. Nominee, whether some INEC staff do not act in collusion to subvert a process that INEC itself has passed and concluded as being clean and clear. Thank you.
Wants to be my relation, and his wife is equally my relation. The Prof, who is being renominated as INEC chairman, happens to be my schoolmate. So in all categories, I'm disqualified from participating in this matter. So I formally declare my interest, and I wish them best of luck. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Consider the registration of more parties because of the turnover of legal issues that these so-called parties brings to the commission. Then the second question is, we have. Okay, the second question, my second question is, you would agree with me that you have a high turnover of legal issues associated with elections. What will you do differently to ensure that we streamline, or at least we bring down the rate of this, the occurrence of this legal decision, because it's both expensive to the commission and also time consuming? Thank you.
Well, before you, political parties, we have now 18 political parties, I think from 92 to 18. And from the records we have, I believe that more political parties need to be registered. So you should go through the process. If you have passed through the screening and the Senate confirms you, you should look at the issue of the registering political parties and let's get to the minimum. From my understanding, I think we wouldn't go more than 5 and find a way out how we can continue to put guidelines properly before parties are registered. So just write that on his questions.
Yeah, the Vice Chair of the committee, going forward, what can INEC do differently? I think it's more of what we have done, because my belief is that we cannot be experimenting constantly. We have to be consolidating. Democracy operates on the basis of a rule that everything must be done in the open and transparently. The only thing that is secret is the ballot. So we have to continue to be open and transparent in the way we continue to manage this public trust. I hope that in the next few years we'll consolidate to such an extent that Nigerians can vote and go home confident that their votes will count, and only their votes will determine who eventually wins an election. This one is my hope, my commitment. Number two, what are we going to do differently? We'll continue to deepen the use of technology in elections. It has helped us enormously. The register of voters is biometric. We are now uploading results online to a dedicated portal. And we'll continue to explore other ways by which the electoral process can continue to benefit from the deployment of technology. I know that there are misgivings in some quarters about the efficacy of some aspects of technology in elections, but we shouldn't be deterred. The Commission is determined to continue to deepen the use of technology in elections. Thirdly, what would I like to see done differently? It's not everything that INEC does is in the realm of what the Commission itself does. There are responsibilities that belong to other stakeholders. For instance, election is a process based on the electoral legal framework. So I really would like to see a situation, distinguished senators, where the electoral amendment bill is expeditiously considered and passed. And I'm confident that this is going to be done. For the first time ever, the Commission met with members of the Senate and House committees on INEC and electoral matters in Lagos. We had an extensive interaction, and we submitted 78 areas of amendment to the Electoral Act. And on 4th November, I also forwarded additional 13 areas of amendment to the two committees. The earlier that is done, the better for us. There is no way we can conduct elections successfully in an atmosphere of uncertainty. The electoral legal framework has to be finalized for us to now develop our regulations and guidelines for the elections. We have to develop the regulations and guidelines for the elections for us to produce manuals for the training of ad hoc staff that will actually conduct the elections in the field. So this is critical. So distinguished Senator, these are my three areas of focus for now. To continue to assure Nigerians that their votes will count, and we have demonstrated in recent elections that this is doable. To continue to deepen the use of technology in elections, and to continue to appeal to the National Assembly to please expeditiously conclude work on the Electoral Act so that there will be certainty in what we do. What we intend to do this time around, is to ensure that things that we require for the election shouldn't wait until the election year. There are some critical aspects of our work that have to be done and concluded next year. And we just have to find the resources to do so. If we need to replace broken ballot boxes or voting cubicles, that shouldn't go beyond 2021. We are done with that. If there are other material that we require, that we don't need them closer to the elections, we need to acquire them so that we prepare in earnest. But the key to success is the amendment to the electoral legal framework. And I'm confident that the Senate and the House will work expeditiously. Was it yesterday or the day before? The House passed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill after second reading and committed it to committees. I want to commend the chairman because he has been actually speaking to me about preparations for joint public hearing by the two committees, which will make the process even faster. But I hope, distinguished senators, you will give us a brand new Electoral Act by the end of the first quarter of 2021, that's by March. That will be very, very, very useful and very helpful to the electoral process and to the growth of our democracy. Distinguished Senator Taslim Folarin, you talked about teaching, that I have passion and love for teaching. Let me make a confession that my father was actually a headmaster. So, if you like, it's in us. Is there any job that I enjoy doing a lot? Yes, it's teaching. I have my office in the university. Anytime I finish with this national assignment, rest assured I'm going to teach. I'm going back to my teaching profession. Fortunately, professors retire at the age of 70, so I still have more years of teaching even after the second tenure, assuming that the Senate confirms the nomination. So I love the teaching profession. But you asked, was any rec found wanting? And how was it corrected? It's a very difficult question for me to ask in the context of specifics. If there is any specific issue with a specific rec that the distinguished senator would like to raise to know what action we have taken, then I can respond in that manner. But generally speaking, to say, well, there are issues, yes, we have meetings with the recs. Every quarter we meet with them. If there are issues, we discuss those issues. But unless there is something specific that the distinguished senator has in mind, then it's difficult for me to respond.
But Chairman is asking your experience. It doesn't have to be specific. Maybe you have been in charge of this place. So you have come in contact with one of those recs who at least reported to you a wrongdoing.
I have had a wonderful experience with the recs. They are all highly experienced in their own right, and we'll continue to work with them. But in the absence of anything specific, irrespective of any specific rec, it's very difficult to answer that question directly. Distinguished Senator I.D. Gang, do we need strong institutions or strong leaders? In my view, we need both. Because strong leaders also create strong institutions. Strong institutions don't create themselves. Leaders create strong institutions. The challenge is how do you sustain these strong institutions once they are established. You talked about the independence of INEC. We need two things to protect the integrity of the Commission's independence. One, we can't operate outside the provision of the enabling laws. Laws are critical. But equally critical is the character of those who are saddled with the responsibility of managing the elections in Nigeria. So much depends on the integrity that we bring on board to the work that we do. So it's actually a mixture of both. We need strong laws. We also need strong will for us to be able to implement those laws. I thought the distinguished senator, the vice chair of the committee, will talk about his own experience in Zamfara, where that kind of strong will showed in the 2019 general elections. Then, distinguished Senator I.D. Gang, you talked about disqualification or the unlawful exclusion of candidates. You are talking basically about the omission from ballot papers. Could it have happened as a result of connivance with INEC officials? I have no evidence at present that INEC officials connived with whoever or anybody to deliberately exclude a political party from the ballot. But it can happen. The system is essentially manual, but we are trying our best to make it digital. In the 2019 general elections, for instance, we processed over 24,000 nominations. 24,000 nominations of candidates from political parties. So it's possible in that process for one or two cases to slip through. But I don't think there is any deliberate policy or deliberate attempt by staff of the commission to ensure the exclusion of of candidates or the exclusion of logos of political parties from the ballot paper. We know the consequences. The commission would like to be conducting one election after another simply on account of that. And I'm very happy to say that in discussion with the last Senate Committee on INEC and the National Assembly, and distinguished Senator Abubakar Kyari will bear me witness, there was an attempt to address that problem by saying that we should display the materials for election so that candidates and parties can go and check and see if their names are or not on the logo, rather than keep quiet until after elections and they go to court to get the elections nullified. Senator Babakaita, are we going to consider the deregistration of more parties based on the number of litigations involving political parties? But that is not what the Constitution says. The Constitution doesn't say deregister political parties because you have too many litigations. The Constitution is very clear on what we should do to deregister political parties. Then how can we streamline the enormous litigations? The cases are actually in two categories. We have the pre-election litigations involving political parties, which is essentially a political party matter. In the 2019 general elections, we had more cases, more litigations on the conduct of primaries by political parties than litigations challenging the outcome of elections. And some of the consequences are still living with us. In March this year, we conducted 4 by-elections as a result of death of members of the National and State Assemblies. Early this week, the Election Petition Appeal Tribunal nullified the election we conducted in Magamari-Jau, federal constituency in Niger State. But the reason for the nullification of the election had nothing to do with INEC or the conduct of elections, but everything to do with the nomination of candidates by political parties. So we'll continue to do what we can. If parties qualify for deregistration, the provisions of the 4th alteration are very clear. They will be invoked, but will not invoke the provisions of the 4th alteration simply in order to reduce the number of political parties. That will create more problems for us. Then the chairman added a footnote whether we are going to deregister political parties. And the chairman has already pegged the number of political parties to be deregistered. INEC will continue to operate on the basis of the law. We'll do what the law says. If it's 5 political parties or 10 political parties or more, we'll operate on the basis of the law.
Or even less.
We'll operate on the basis of the law. Thank you, distinguished. Until the law is changed by the National Assembly.
Voter turnout, of course, vis-a-vis voter education. From your records, we have well over 80 million registered voters. But from my experience, from the elections of 1999 to date, I think I will not be totally wrong if I say that we've never registered up to 50% turnout of registered voters. What do you think is responsible for this poor turnout on the election day? I know for voter education is part of the responsibility of INEC, the political parties, and all other responsible citizens. And if you agree the turnout has been below average, what, in your opinion, needs to be done to improve upon the turnout of voters on the election day? Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I remember on the day we had the last year's budget defense, I raised an observation, and I still want to raise the same thing, the issue of too many ad hoc staff to handle the affairs of election. And I proposed that INEC may wish to borrow from our constituency of education of some kind of retainership of examiners. I made an example of the West Africa Examination Council and NECO. You begin as an examiner, you grew to an assistant examiner, you grew up to senior examiner, chief examiner, so that the experiences of those who conduct these elections are retained. A situation whereby almost 90% of those who actually do the field work are ad hoc staff on training of just about 1-2 weeks. It's not helping matters. Agree, INEC may not be able to retain all of this. But I think at the senior level, returning officers, supervisors, don't you think it would be helpful if you keep record of very responsible officers who served in certain capacities during elections, so that gradually you have experienced people serving over the years. You don't have to recruit fresh ones every year all over the time, which probably explains the number of problems we experience, largely as a result of poor understanding of the process and ignorance of the process of the election. So what do you think we can do to improve upon the staff you recruit in terms of their experiences, tapping from their experiences? I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
My two questions will border on the unusual terrain. The first has to do with Nigerians in the diaspora. And Prof, I'm wondering, what voting strategy would you recommend to include Nigerians in the diaspora in elections and the electoral process? That will be question one, because that's an unusual terrain. My second question will have to do with the riverine areas. In the area of logistics, there are still issues with riverine areas and other difficult terrain. How, if given the opportunity to come back as INEC chairman, how do you intend to overcome some of the challenges that we have been dealing with over the years, which also form part of the major chunk of the election petition cases that we have had to contend with in court? Distinguished Chairman, those will be my questions for now.
The first simple question is that historically, from 1999 to today, there has been very, very significant improvement in our electoral processes. The 2019 election was a good one from what I've seen, what I've witnessed, and I'm a testimony to that. But we need to continue to raise the bar. We need to continue to improve. What are your plans for the 2023 elections, if you are confirmed, to further raise the bar? What do we look forward to? And following that closely is, you've been in INEC in the last 5 years. Do you think your officers are motivated enough in terms of remuneration, security, name it, for them to continue to be committed, to key into that vision of raising the bar of INEC in delivering our electoral processes? Thank you.
Maybe this chamber in this Senate will ask you about the improvement of the welfare of your staffs. These are the people that goes for election, and they could easily be motivated during election days. But if their welfare is improved, I'm sure they will be strong and continue to service well to the government or to the INEC as a unit or in an organization. So, just a rider to that. What do you need? How far have you gone with the improvement of the welfare?
Defend our budget for 2021. Distinguished Senator Opemi Bamidele and the distinguished chairman of the committee harped on the issue of welfare of staff. And I recall that the committee gave us 3 months to come back with specific proposals on how this can be achieved. Distinguished Chair, we are still within our 3 months. So we'll come back.
So you are telling us to confirm you so that you can go and we'll look into that.
We'll come back. And then let me go to the question asked by His Excellency Senator Ibrahim Shekau on voter turnout in relation to voter education. That hardly have we achieved 50% voter turnout in our elections. That is true in the sense that in Nigeria there's no requirement that election is only valid when there is 50% plus one voter turnout, as it obtains in other jurisdictions. Ours is a simple first past the post system. So irrespective of the turnout, once you have the margin of lead, you make a declaration and a return is made. But this is related to quite a number of things. I absolutely agree that we need to do more as INEC in the area of voter education. But that is where our responsibility as INEC ends. Voter education means that we need to tell the voters what to do on election day when they get to the polling units. The nature of the ballot paper, the voting procedure, how they queue in the context of COVID, the outer and the inner queues. But there is another important function that is supposed to be discharged by others, particularly the political parties and agencies such as the National Orientation Agency, and that is in the area of voter mobilization. Political parties should mobilize the voters because they need the votes. INEC cannot go and mobilize voters to vote. We can only educate them on how they vote on election day. So others have to come in to help with voter mobilization. So many have been helping us. We have a system of going around with the Inter-Party Advisory Council whenever major elections are conducted to do voter education and mobilization. Civil society organizations have also helped in that respect. But it's a shared responsibility between the Commission and other stakeholders. The second is violence or threat of violence. Some people tend not to go and vote simply for that fear, particularly when the atmosphere, as always, is charged on the eve of major elections. So some people just err on the side of caution by staying away instead of risking it by going out to vote. The third one, distinguished Senator, is sometimes actually the performance of those elected. It's a very important factor. Now, some voters will ask you, why should I go and vote? Because 4 years earlier, some people made the same promise that they made 4 years ago, so nothing has changed. If nothing has changed, why should I go out and vote? So it's a shared responsibility that we all have to put our heads together to solve. But we'll continue to do what we are required to do by law in the area of voter education and publicity. Recruitment of ad hoc staff. Actually, the Commission has been working on that possibility, the possibility of having a portal from which we can draw dedicated, tested, trusted, credible election duty staff so that you can use them over and over again. But the drawback sometimes is once some of the candidates realize that there is regularity and certainty, they then descend on the ad hoc staff. It happened to many of the ad hoc staff we recruited, particularly those from the universities. You know, in the interest of transparency, we train them, they have their numbers, and sometimes they actually intimidate election duty staff. So it's a balancing act that we have to make. While I agree that we need that certainty, we need to build a core of experienced people, but we also need to be mindful of the downside of it. And the downside is that some people may just identify them and then intimidate them or even do worse. Senator Opayemi Terrain, you asked two questions. One is Nigerians in the diaspora. This is a recurring decimal in our discussions. When will Nigerians living outside the country be given the right to vote? If you look at all our neighbors, and I've visited all our neighbors as president of the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions, not only do they do diaspora voting, but in some cases they also have what they call overseas constituencies. Some countries have 5 members of their national assemblies representing each of the 5 continents of the world. So they vote in diaspora and they send a representative to the national parliament. So as far as INEC is concerned, and I keep repeating myself on this matter, that we are actually preaching to the converted. But we can't run faster than the law provides. The law says that you can only vote while you are registered. If you don't register in London or any other place, you simply cannot vote. But for us as a commission, we have done the following. First, we have identified the areas of amendment to the Constitution and the Electoral Act for voters to be registered outside the country and for political parties to also be able to organize and raise funds outside the country. If you notice now, when politicians go abroad, they don't speak to Nigerians as if they are on campaign. They say, no, they are only addressing Nigerians in the diaspora. And the law also says that once there is a contribution to a political party from outside the country, the funds should be warehoused by INEC. And political parties can only draw from the funds where they write and justify to the commission what they want to use the money for. So we need to amend the Electoral Act. I have been also speaking with Ms. Abike Dabiri in the Nigeria Diaspora Commission to get data. On our own as a commission, we contacted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We engaged with the Nigeria Intelligence Agency. We contacted the Ministry of Defense. We also contacted the Nigeria and Diaspora Commission so that we have some basic data of where we have the largest concentration of Nigerians to see where we start from. But the starting point is that you have to amend the law for that to happen. For as long as the law is not amended, that may not happen. Difficult terrain, distinguished, and I'm happy, distinguished Senator Bamidele Opayemi, that I also understand you chair the Senate Committee on Legal Matters. So you are wearing a double cap. I need you on legal matters.
The ball is in his court.
So please do so that we can put smiles on the faces of Nigerians living outside the country. But as far as INEC is concerned, we're already preaching to the converted. There are two dimensions to this issue, and I keep saying this. There are Nigerians on foreign service. There are Nigerians on military missions abroad, peacekeeping missions. There are Nigerians serving as members of the Technical Aid Corps in other countries. These are not permanently resident citizens outside Nigeria. They are there for a specific duration and for a specific assignment. They too should be given the right to vote. So that should be extended to them. And by the same token, we should also extend it to categories of Nigerians who don't vote during elections in Nigeria, either because they are journalists and they are deployed to places outside their normal places of residence, and therefore they cannot vote for that reason, or they are observers of elections, they are deployed to places where they are not registered, therefore they can't vote, or INEC officials, or even the ad hoc staff that we are talking about. And in the last general election, we engaged about 1 million ad hoc staff for the general election. So these are potentially 1 million people who did not vote during elections. By the time you add the media and civil society, the number is huge. The election is getting competitive. We have seen places where the equivalent of one polling unit determines who becomes a governor of a state, 300, 400. So when you have 1 million Nigerians not being able to vote, is a major issue. But the ball, as I said, is in the court of the National Assembly. For difficult terrain, INEC doesn't have its own roads. We rely on public roads. We don't have our own power supply. We don't have our own vehicles. We don't have our own boats. We rely on the public infrastructure. Election rides on the back of the national infrastructure. But we have a situation in Nigeria today where INEC is the only election management body that I know of in the world that during election we have to generate our own electricity. We buy generators, deploy generators to 8,809 collation centers, ward collation centers. So INEC becomes a mini power holding company during elections. When we deploy the ad hoc staff to the super racks before we deploy them on Saturday for the elections, we provide water. We carry GP tanks. We get people to supply water. We provide toiletries. We provide drinking water. So INEC becomes a mini water board during the elections. So the enormity of the challenges are just there. And then, in the case of difficult terrain, we engage both owners. We have an understanding with the Marine Union. And the Marine Union is going to be involved on Saturday next week in Bayelsa for the election. But sometimes they gang up in the morning and just jack up the price. The commission is ready to deploy, but they said, no, we agreed with you that you are going to give us X amount. Unless you double it, we won't deploy. And if they don't deploy, Nigerians go to the polling units on election day on Saturday. They see no INEC official, they see no INEC materials, INEC again, not knowing that we're having difficulty with those boat owners. So there are enormous challenges. But what we have done, and you can see the progressive improvement in some of the most recent elections. In Ondo, for instance, in October, one of the most difficult places for us to deploy and to do reverse logistics during elections is Elijah and Esodo. But fantastic, we deployed to Elijah and Esodo in good time, and we got results and our personnel and materials out in good time, even though one of the boats actually capsized. Fortunately, we didn't lose any personnel, we didn't lose any materials. In fact, learning from experience in the case of Elijah and Esodo, we had to wrap the materials in polythene material. We have to wrap the materials in polythene so that it can float on the river and it won't be damaged when it's sucked in water. So we'll continue to do that. I think it's either in Ovia West or Ovia East or Ovia Southwest in Edo State. We also had the same experience. It's one of the riverine areas of Edo State. And then we are doing the same thing as we speak in Bayelsa. We are deploying to Ekeremo. We are deploying to Kolokuma, Okuma. We are deploying to southern Ijo. Getting to Oproma from Yenagoa is an uphill task. You spend hours on boats on the open seas. And whenever we deploy, we also deploy gunboats to protect the materials and personnel so that nothing happens to them on the open seas. So we'll continue to see what we can do, but everything is tied to our national infrastructure. We don't have, as I said earlier, all roads. We don't have our own boats. We don't have our own electricity. We don't have our own water. But we'll continue to do what we can, particularly in the riverine areas. Not only riverine areas, but difficult terrains. Some people think that in the FCT, everywhere is like Wuse and Gariki and Maitama and Asokoro. There are parts of the Federal Capital Territory in Abuja that are not even motorable at all. So when we conduct elections, we liaise with the National Union of Okada Riders. And I remember in 2016, when the Okada Riders were carrying materials and personnel to locations, somebody posted a mischievous story online to say the region has started, they are moving materials with the motorcycles, not knowing that we are trying to get to the village. So we'll continue to do what we can under the difficult, challenging circumstances. Mr. Chairman, on this matter, I wish to say this. Election is the only activity in which we deploy to 120,000 locations nationwide. For that activity to happen at the same time nationwide, 8 in the morning, or now 8:30 because of COVID, and end at 2 or 2:30 because of COVID. There is no other activity that happens in this country that you deploy to 120,000 locations. Conducting elections is a huge logistical nightmare, but we'll continue to do our best and to improve on the processes. Finally, Senator Sadiq Umar, plans for future elections. I think, distinguished Senator, I responded to these issues in my opening statements. So perhaps there's no need for me to repeat what I've said earlier. On staff welfare, I think I've also referred to it. We do a lot to see how we can improve staff welfare. Insurance, for instance, group life, we do so. And we also pay electoral hazard allowance for staff. But again, at the end of the day, we can only do with the envelope budget. The chairman of the committee has been saying that perhaps we should tier the envelope. I don't know how to tier the envelope. Perhaps the chairman should help us tier it and get a bigger envelope so that people will be happy in the commission. Thank you, distinguished chairman.
Well, yeah, I used to send him back, we had last, before the Ondo election, where we witnessed we lost card readers because of fire incidents. And we ask you to investigate and find out what really happened. And if people are found wanting, you should discipline or take action on that. What steps are you making to recover those or to purchase or to recover this loss of card readers and also to prevent any instance of this happening? Because the way we saw how you stored the container, the card readers, is awful. How you put them in a container and container exposed to heat, And the only thing which you did was you put one AC in one of the containers, and that may not be good enough because of the heat. So you have to devise a system or a way of which you can now store your card readers in a safe position. Then the last one is the issue of the budget of the general election. The last election, I know you experienced lack of funding. It didn't come early, it came almost at the last minute of the election. Therefore, we suggested that you should split your national election budget into two. You will start having funds from 2021 and then the balance in 2022 so that the non-sensitive materials can be purchased. And if we agree on electronic voting, then you need to make plans to get electronic voting machines to specify it for Nigerian election. So therefore, what make efforts, if you are cleared, or before even you left the office, what efforts did you make in that respect? I think this, if you answer these questions, I think we can let you go.
Of God. The truth about the card reader is that the machine is actually designed by INEC. Perhaps many Nigerians don't know that. They were fabricated overseas, but engineers, IT experts in INEC designed the card reader. That is why it can withstand heat at 80 degrees centigrade. So the fact that they are kept in those containers doesn't mean that some diodes or some components will melt simply because of heat. After all, we have been keeping them in those containers since 2010, 2011. We had very little incidents. So, but that is not to say that we are happy or comfortable with the spate of fire incidents. Recall that before the 2019 general election, we had a big problem in Anambra. Fortunately, we had spare capacity nationwide. So we had to run around to get the spare capacity to enable us conduct the general elections in Anambra State. And then unfortunately in Ondo, we also had another fire incident. The entire card readers were burnt down. We recovered from that by getting some card readers, or the card readers required in Ondo, from Oyo State. So we're able to conduct the elections. But yes, we have shortfalls. Not only as a result of fire incidents, we also had many other issues. Technical glitches with the card readers, sometimes theft of the card readers by sheer act of thuggery. There was a state in Nigeria in the 2015 and 2016 court order rerun for like services, ad hoc staff, which can only be paid sometimes after the election or on the eve of the elections, can then be done during the election year. We're also working on that possibility. We have learned from the experience of 2019. If we don't do so, it is possible for us to be so overwhelmed and so overburdened. But the chairman has also put his finger on the problem. Even though the chairman has said that I like pushing the problem back to the committee. I know that I spent 4 months lobbying the National Assembly for the approval of the 2019 election budget. I appeared before every committee in this house, from the Joint Leadership Committee, House Committee, Senate Committee, Joint House and Senate Committees, ad hoc committees of the Joint Committees.
We wanted to be convinced. We wanted to be convinced of your performance.
So thank you very much. We'll be very proactive this time around. Thank you.
Okay, Prof, and the members have asked questions, and we really appreciate the way you answered those questions. You are more professorial in your questions, and because of your experience during the last 5 years of Nigerian election, I think you are able to give us answers to the questions we ask you. And the questions that we ask you, some of them are emailed to us by Nigerians who really wanted to know what is really happening in INEC. And I want to thank those Nigerians who send us their questions or email us questions which we are able to ask you. And to my understanding, the understanding of my colleagues, you answered well. Then finally, I believe you still have time. If we cleared you, there's still time. The papers have to, we have to pass it to the Senate. Senate have to approve, and then send it to Mr. President. I think it's when Mr. President agrees to swear you into office, then that's when you move to your new or your old office. So finally, I thank all those who are here with us, and we still have one nominated to take also for to take defense on that. But let's hold on now. Chairman, maybe move a motion that you can be discharged to go and let's handle the other nominee. But if you want to wait, it wouldn't take more than 5-10 minutes.
My difficulty is that he gave me a lift.